Hello, welcome. It's Adam again. Now we're going to talk about the 5 characteristics of effective presenters and presentations. This is a thing that we're going to come back to a number of times throughout the course. We're going to talk about it a lot whenever you do reflections, and just in general, like you should use it as a way to assess how well you're doing in your talks. Because usually when you ask somebody like, how'd your talk go? They say, oh, I did good or I did bad or what, and that's all they got to go on. But we're going to give you these 5 characteristics, and each of them has a subset of things. And it really gets down to like a granular level of like, I do well on this particular thing, but not this other thing. And so our objectives for today, we're just going to identify the 5 characteristics. We're also going to talk a little bit later about common myths that people have about presenting. And then we are finally going to, wrap up with like how to like work these into your own talks. So get excited. All right. So what do we think the first one is? Any guesses? I know that you can't guess because this is the internet, but they are clarity, variability, enthusiasm, pacing and timing, interaction, and participation. These are the 5 things, according to research, that are really important to consider whenever you want to make yourself a great presenter. So let's go through them. They're in no particular order, but we're going to start with clarity. So in what ways can we achieve clarity? Here they are. Are you ready? So here's one that you probably thought of. First is voice, right? Obviously, we need to have clear voices. We need to enunciate. We need to not mumble. We need to project loud enough so that the people in the back of the room can hear us. That's kind of very basic public speaking stuff. But some other things are clarity of content and concepts. So, for example, let's say you do a great job, in terms of like enunciating and being charismatic and extroverted and talking to the room and whatnot, but your message is jumbled because you didn't take the time to organize it in a way that flowed logically and linearly so we can move from step 1 to step 2 instead of step 1 to step 3 to 5 to 2 to 4, et cetera, et cetera. So those are things to consider, and things that we will be kind of grading you on is, did you organize your message in a way that was easy for people to follow? Another way that we can achieve clarity is we can have clear visuals, right? So you could have a PowerPoint with a red background and black text, and that nobody can read that. So please don't ever do that. Or white with yellow text. Don't ever have yellow text. Nobody can read it. Things become not clear. And then finally, you could theoretically get all of the organization right, but then deliver it in a muddled way, skip around or lose your place, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these are ways that you can think about how was I clear to my audience to go back and sort of assess those. How do we achieve clarity? I'm going to give you a hint. It's the same answer for all of these. With planning and practice. Woo. If you were in class, I would make you chant that. So here's some things about communication that you may not know. Here's the breakdown of when we think about the total of you communicating to an audience. 55% of it is visual, meaning nonverbal cues. 58% or 38% is your vocal inflection, and only 7% is the words that you choose. Okay, so know that people always worry about stumbling over their words and not getting the words exactly right. But just know that that is actually a very small part of what it is that you're trying to convey. So visual, so nonverbal cues, the 55%. This could be what you wear, right? Because what you wear conveys I'm serious about this. I want to look professional. Blah blah blah. It could be your PowerPoint. It could also be your posture, right? If you're hiding in the corner trying to present, we get the sense that you're probably not prepared for this or confident or whatever. You could be not gesturing. You could be standing like a robot. And so we get the sense that this person is terrified, et cetera, et cetera. Voice, vocal inflection. This is, the pitch and cadence of your voice, right? Fascinating fact, they just did a study on dogs and found that dogs actually, I can't remember if I didn't say it exactly right, but basically if you were to say to the dog, who wants to get neutered? They would know that you're lying to them because there's some kind of disconnect between your tone and the content. And so they can detect that. Probably the bigger part that's interesting about that is how they trained the dogs to lie still in the MRI while people gave them commands. That's fascinating, right? But so your vocal inflection, right? Nobody ever says, oh, you're such a cute baby. Those things don't go together. And so you got to learn how to modulate your voice and use the appropriate sort of expression for the content that you're trying to convey. And then lastly, again, 7% is just the words that you say. And that's why people have arguments via text message. All right, so the next one is, if I can make it go, number 2 is variability, right? Nobody likes monotone. Nobody likes the same thing for 30 slides. So here are some ways. Obviously, you can be variable with your voice. You can go up, you can go down, et cetera, et cetera. You can pause for emphasis, what have you. You can also be variable with your visuals. We're going to talk about how you need to always have 2 or more visuals, right? Because people learn in different ways. And so that may be having a PowerPoint always and props sometimes, or a handout sometimes, or a flip chart paper sometimes. All these like extra things to sort of keep the variability in the talk so that people understand. There's also physical presence, right? Like, so again, if you stand in one corner of the room, or if you stand behind the lectern the entire time, there's no variety to your physical presence. Like, you're just like, in one spot, and that gets kind of boring. So we encourage you to move around the room and to make gestures and to just generally be animated, because that's more fun for us to watch, okay? And then I already mentioned gestures. And then adaptability, which is just the nature of, sometimes people come in and they have a talk that they've prepared, and then they want to give the talk. And then they're so intent on giving the talk as they prepared it that they don't have the ability to adapt whenever the audience doesn't understand it, or seems to have interest in some other part of the talk. So just know that part of variability is being able to adapt your talk as you go to the group. And that's more of a higher order sort of thing. For the moment, we probably just want to focus on, getting your talk organized and delivered effectively, but know that later on in life, this is the thing you should be striving for. All right, how do we achieve variability? Say it with me. With planning and practice. Okay, great. So enthusiasm. In what ways can we convey enthusiasm in our presentation? Obviously, voice, again, is a big way. Like, nobody's ever like, hey, my name's Adam, and I'm so excited to present to you today on artificial insemination in cows. Because nobody wants to listen to that, because you don't sound like you want to be there, right? So that's a thing. There's also physical presence again, like if you look animated, if you're using gestures, people, like, you're conveying enthusiasm. In general, like, it's good to convey enthusiasm, because if you're not excited about it, like, nobody else is going to be excited about it, right? And we just generally enjoy learning from people who are excited about things. Sorry that I have a monotone. I really am excited to be here. Also, facial expressions. Don't be afraid to smile and like make faces. And then also attitude, just in general. All right, cool. So those things are pretty basic. How do we convey enthusiasm? With planning and practice. You get bonus points if you just said that aloud. Pacing and timing is a little bit different. Okay, so how do we control our pacing and timing? There's a couple different ways. So one is the speed of the voice, okay? So like just in terms of your delivery, all right? And so this means like maybe going faster when you're covering very sort of rote basic information that everybody should know to get to the more important parts. And then slowing down when you want to emphasize a key point that they need to take away, okay? Or pausing for emphasis. And so again, because sometimes people get up and they just have all this information in their head and they're like, oh, I gotta get all the information out of my head. My objectives are, my thing is, blah, blah, blah. And they just like are shouting at you, and you just get the sense that they're just trying to unload this information that they've been preparing. And instead, like, they sound like, a robot or like a deluge of information. And so one of the ways that people tend to appreciate things is to be variable in our voice and controlling its pace. The other way is content. And this one's a little higher order, right? Because like, how does your content have pacing? But so say you come in and you're like, all right, I'm going to teach you about, pork quality assurance. And I have 60 slides and we're going to go through them 1 minute at a time. And that's really boring, right? And so one way to vary, your content is to maybe have an activity, or to have objectives that you go through first and then others that you stay on longer, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just not the same repetitive motion over and over again. There's some variety, and like sense of pace to it. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, we'll dispense with that for the moment. All right, so interactions and participation. This is a big one that people sometimes forget. Like even in the training demo where I'm like, your job is to teach people how to do stuff. And then they literally come in and give a talk and then are like, all right, cool, I'm done. And I'm like, all right, well, imagine if your training demo was how to prepare people to escape the building in the event of a fire. And you came in and you said, all right, I'm going to tell you how, and then you never practice it. You never give them the chance to demonstrate to you that they learned anything. There's no interaction, there's no participation otherwise. How do you actually know that they got it, right? So there's a couple ways, and I just kind of talked about why it's important. But so there's a couple ways that we can build an interaction and participation, right? So some things, it can be as simple as questions at the beginning of your talk. So, who here knows about or has an opinion about vegetarianism, or who here doesn't eat meat, or whatever the case is. And then, even if they're just raising their hand, that's kind of a low impact form of interaction, right? Because they're responding to you. Other sort of higher levels, if you want to have proper a game that they can play, or a quiz that they can take, or a worksheet that they can do, and that gives them the ability to do stuff. And you will learn after sitting through 4 or 5 talks a day that when people don't have some kind of interaction, it gets real tedious. And they will love you if you come in and you're like, all right, I got a worksheet, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna share in our groups, and then they're like, yeah, I get to do something, and that's real exciting. Okay. How do we interact and participate? With planning and practice. All right, cool. All right, in the next video, we'll come back and do myths.